kids, and they still love me to play hide and seek with them, and I'm a pretty good hider.
No, very, very cool. And so who's first to be introduced?
Okay, well, I have Roger and Bob here. So Roger, I'm going to start with Roger. He does agricultural law in Kansas, and he's conducts 80 to 100 seminars annually on agricultural law and agricultural tax. And he's heard weekly on RFD TV and every other week on the WIBW radio and the KSU radio network. And Roger, I'm going to have you give your fun fact.
Well, my fun fact, as I gave it to Craig, is that I have two nieces that are older than me, one of which is 5 years older than me. And we all went to school together in the same rural school in Indiana. We just, we refer to each other as cousins to avoid questions.
So, brother, I mean, 80 to 100 seminars a year. I do a lot of speaking. I know a lot of people do a lot of speaking. That is a commitment. What drives that?
Well, you're right. It's over 300 hours of continuing education for attorneys and CPAs every year. And it's just built, it is built over the years. You do an event, if you do it well, somebody else wants you and then somebody else books you. And for example, I have Fresno coming up. I have to tape that one on September 9th. It's going to play on October 1 for California CPAs. That'll have about 600 that attend that farm tax conference. And usually I'm out person, but this year is different for obvious reasons. So I'm pre-taping that and submitting it, but go coast to coast, pretty much on the run all the time, plus teach 9 credit hours a year at the law school and at Kansas State University. I have a treatise that I just finished the 47th edition on. Plus I'm the editor of the Estate Planning for Farmers and Ranchers and Farm Business Organizations that's published by RIA, and I'm the editor of the Iowa Bar Tax Manual, which is a 1,200-page manual, and things like that. Keeps me busy, and various B&A tax management portfolios that I author too.
Yeah, can I just like confront something? Like, when you get to work, like, what are you doing, man? You're not doing much in the world. I like that. I'm kidding, of course. That is unbelievable. The amount of your publications, your speaking, and the impact. But I'm just curious, like, what's the real why though? Like, why are you doing all this? Because
I'll tell you what started this. When I was in college, undergraduate, that was the depths of the farm crisis in the 1980s, and that really struck home. It didn't affect our operation because we had no debt. But the girl I was dating at the time in college, her father lost his farming operation. We actually went to high school together, and he struggled and struggled. He lost his farming operation because of that. And that's where I got interested in studying. I was an ag econ major at Purdue in management, and then went on to law school to eventually get into that career. And then during my second year of law school, I started the national tour of speaking, and off the platform in Minneapolis one Saturday afternoon when I finished speaking, there were several attorneys that met me on the stage and said, we'd like you to come to North Platte, Nebraska and work for us when you're done with law school. And that was 1.5 years to go, plus the bar exam. And at the time, that was the #1 firm in the country for the representation of farmers and ranchers on the tax side of things. So that's where I hauled my wife out to from Des Moines, Iowa. And she wondered where's North Platte? My response was, well, it's west of Omaha. And so she said, oh, okay. It's on the west side of Omaha. I didn't tell her until later it was 4 hours west of Omaha, but we made it. We had our son when we were out there, and then K-State called and wanted to start an agricultural law program. Did that for 11 years, and then Iowa State wanted a program, so I went there and started one. And then Washburn has been after me had been after me for over 20 years, and so I finally said, well, I think it's time to go to law school and also go back to K-State. So I'm doing both and continue to travel and write and working with farmers and ranchers. And again, we've cycled into another farm depression the past few years. And so the lessons learned in the 80s have been very helpful this cycle around.
Amazing. And if I were to say this, and excuse us for taking as much time as ever, Roger, this has just been, incredibly unique amount of speaking. I didn't know that about you, so thank you. And if I were to say this, that the stage and the microphone, like a stage and a microphone, which is where you spend so much of your time, creates such an extraordinary ability to create impact, to change your own life and the life of others. Is that a statement you'd agree with?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's the point that I try and get across to my law students too. And I even emphasize it. I teach third-year students, and so I'm kind of one of the last gates they have to get through to get to a bar exam. And when they get to me, I tell them, I'm going to change your writing style. I know you've been taught a certain way from your first year in law school, and I'm going to change it entirely. Because I'm going to boil it down. I do a lot of radio, a lot of TV, and I got to get a point out in about 2.5 minutes. And I've got to show the application of that. And so I want you to distill that in your writing. Figure out, what's the take home here? Why is this important to a farmer or a rancher? Why should they care? And really emphasize what it is that the point is that you're trying to drive home, and make a point to make sure they understand why you're talking about this. And that's the way I teach, whether it's attorneys, CPAs, farmers, ranchers, and that's the way I write also. I also have a blog that I write 100 articles a year that are fully annotated, and for attorneys and CPAs and whoever. And that right now, that's pushing about 4,000 page views every day, 4,000 subscribers every day that look at that.
This is a heart-centered, brilliant, integritous marketing engine sitting here. By the way, you scored marketing as an integrous dynamic of getting our message out, right? And it's awesome. So pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, so Craig, who do we have next?
All right, and then the next one is Bob. Bob did I say it? Bob?
That's okay. It's Bob McKeegan, but I don't expect you to remember that. Believe me.
I was real close on that one, Bob. All
Bob,
right.
is it Bob McKeegan?
Yep, McKeegan. Yep.
McKeegan. Thank you. So please, Craig.
Sure. Well, thank you, Craig, for inviting me. And I guess let's see. I'm with Holland and Knight, a Fortune 100 law firm, 23 domestic offices. I'm in the DC office, and I do what's a real niche. I do federal real estate. I represent REITs, developers, owners that have real estate assets that they lease or build for the federal government. In fact, although I don't do as much speaking, I probably only speak a couple times a year, but I recently wrote a book. I'm sure it's not in high circulation, but it's federal government real estate leasing. And we update it each year. And I got the start when I ended up working at the General Services Administration as general counsel years ago. Parlayed that into private practice. What I enjoy most about my practice is helping clients succeed and avoiding surprises. When they enter into leases with the federal government, it's very different than the private sector. And many of them who are uninformed and unsophisticated about it learn later that it's a lot more complicated than I thought. So for me, the pleasure comes when clients actually reach out, want to know something, and listen and implement some of my ideas. Fun facts. Well, Sean, when I was younger, I'm a baby boomer. So back in the 60s, I used to be the entertainment for my friends when they wanted to go surfing. So what they would do, they'd take me along, and then they'd get to watch me chase my board to the beach. And we didn't have any leg straps or whatever they call them, so we would always have to, swim to the beach and pick up those boards that were at least 10 footers.
Oh my God!
But another interesting fact, as an attorney, people presume that I don't know which end of a screwdriver to use. But when I was in my 30s and 40s with my brother and another colleague, we hands-on built a house up at Lake Tahoe. And I continue in woodworking. I've got a full-fledged shop in my basement. And so I enjoy doing things. It's sort of a relief from some of the challenges of practicing law. I mean, the disappointing thing about practicing law is that you always can't control the outcome. And when I build things, I can control what I build. And if it's not right, I fix it.
Yeah.
You can't fix it when you're going to court and you get a negative outcome.
But you mean judges sometimes make
Oh,
mistakes?
yes, God, yes. I started my career as a prosecutor in Oakland, California. And a lot of newbie judges, that was when Jerry Brown appointed a lot of judges. And yeah, you just, that's, people ask me, well, what's your prognosis for litigation? What do you think is going to happen? And I say, you'll never know until you get the judge, because they come in all shapes and sizes, as you know, Sean.
Oh, my friend, amen. Two quick questions. What role, and we'll drop back on that judge point, what role does skiing play in your life out in Tahoe, if any?
Oh, it was a big part of my life. In fact, that's a part I miss, being here on the West Coast, East Coast. I mean, that was a big part. I mean, when I was in college, vacations with my fraternity were always up at Squaw Valley.
Oh,
Believe me, I mean, but for the grace of God, I'm still here. I can tell you that.
Did you ever ski KT 22?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And then, well, I skied it, put it this way, I got down it. Okay. I can remember when, you're young and stupid, peer pressure was pretty important. So, when the guys called me up to the top of the KT 22, that was a big mistake. To this day, I can remember looking down, and you are looking straight down.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not looking, whoa, I got down, but wow.
So I am blind. Like I can't see anything on this screen.
I know, and you do it too.
I've skied KT 22 with audio assist with my son, left, right, and skiing the moguls by feel. And that was one of the scariest experiences of my entire skiing life. So,
well, if you had watched me, you probably would have thought that I couldn't see where I was going. So it was, but anyway, those were some good times. And California was a big part of it. Lake Tahoe was a big part of it. So when I went into private practice, we bought a lot and we built a home. And I know more about building homes. And so every once in a while, when I'm involved in construction matters, it's helpful.
Very cool. Well, Bob, pleasure. Thank you for being here. Craig.
That's it. That's all we have. I have wonderful Karen, our wonderful judge, and she's got some beautiful Hawaiian background behind her. So she.
Yeah. Well, as well as the one and only Adam Gugino. If I get Adam, Adam's my partner.
Here, so yeah, wonderful Adam.
What's up, Adam? And if you could share your background briefly.
Oh, absolutely. So I took a organization, a solar company, from a startup, 30 employees, annualizing about $3 million a year, was hired to build an inside sales team, and took it from 0 employees to 500 in 3.5 years. We made Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing privately held companies in the country 3 years in a row. We were annualizing $750 million by August of last year. And yes, that's when I went out to an event, Tony Robbins event, Business Mastery. And, I always knew that I had a great sense of sales and influence capabilities. And then Sean, when I met you and saw you on stage and was able to really meet with you and see what you were up to in the world, I decided to walk away from the position I was at, which meant walking away from millions, if not tens of millions of dollars. Each partner said that as I walked out the door, in order to work alongside of you, because of, there's nobody better in the world at understanding the superpower of influence. And my mission and passion and purpose is to be able to spread that and put that in the right hands so we could change the world for good. And I'm just super grateful to be here and excited to get this going. I know, Sean, you were definitely listening to Roger, Bob here, and just feeling chills and really excited about and honored to have them both here as well, because of their incredible backgrounds and the
Yeah,
synergy.
with that, and so I think, Roger and Bob, again, thanks so much for being here. And you know, I think so many people, and I'd love to just bounce back and forth a little bit with this, and then we could see where we go in terms of the role play dynamic. But there's so much value that you bring to the world, and I guess, Roger, a question I would have is, a lot of what I teach and work on is, I think that a lot of people in the legal profession suffer, and they suffer from a lack of freedom of choice, about their life and about the business dynamics of it. And it seems like if I was in teaching my course, right, I would be teaching people to be you. That's exactly what it is, to be literally, like, right, and Bob, Fortune 100 firm, et cetera, like, but to speak and to create impact and to build relationship, because that gives you choices. So how did you, what was it about speaking that, because so many attorneys don't get that piece, and clearly you have it, and so many attorneys don't get the other pieces that you have about marketing, right? What freed that up? Like, what was the access for you about that?
The need to make a living, to be blunt.
Oh, yeah. But how did you realize that speaking would create that for you? I mean, it does, but so many people don't get that. Like, how did you learn that?
I've always been blessed with the ability to, I guess, have a way with words. And again, as I said, I started a national speaking tour as a second-year law student. And, you put in people don't see the work that you put in behind, say, a 30-minute or a 60-minute presentation, let alone now most of what I do are 8-hour presentations, all day long, day after day. And people don't see that work. If you put in the work and you distill it down and you try to understand what the practical problems, in my situation, a farmer or a rancher faces, what is the tax effect of doing such and such? Let me give you an example. In my field, it's so dynamic that the reason I can crank out 130 detailed articles on a blog, and this is not a typical blog. This is a legal article, 130 times a year, fully annotated, fully cited, all of that. And I'm about ready to put one out tomorrow on IC discs and FD2s, which are, if I'm a farmer and I'm selling into an export market, here are some tax benefits for you. My stuff writes itself. People ask me, well, how do you come up with all this stuff? Just 2 weeks ago, there was an inland hurricane that went from eastern Nebraska all the way to the Indiana-Ohio line. Destroyed everything in its path for about 40 to 50 miles wide. And of course, they call it a derecho. And as I did a radio interview, I said, that's the term that the weather people have come up for when we have a hurricane that the national media pays zero attention to, which means it hit the Midwest. But it caused millions upon millions and billions of dollars of damage. Boom, there's an article. Okay, I'm a farmer. I got hit with this. Now I've got severely damaged grain bins, buildings, all kinds of stuff. I can't rebuild it. I'm going to have to demolish it. What are the tax implications of demolishing structures? There was my article that ran 2 days later. And that turned into an RFD TV program that turned into 2 other radio programs. So I went, and satellite radio on top of that. And then various state bar associations, the Iowa bar, the Indiana bar, the Illinois bar, all picked up that article. So when you look for things like that, and early on, it's building a reputation. And the more you do things and the more requests you get, then people realize that, hey, that's got value to it. And then that continues to build. And then you put a piece out and people are wanting it. They're wanting it. So it just, and you're right, attorneys are terrible at that. And I mentioned that to my law students. If you're going to start out in practice, get involved in the community, show them some extra value that you can offer, particularly in the rural communities. We've got situations now where what we're trying to do at the law school is rebuild and restaff the depleted areas in the center part of the country and into the eastern part of the West, that don't have any attorneys. We've got farmers and ranchers that have to go 2 to 3 hours before they can find competent legal counsel that can handle their issues. And so we're trying to replenish that. And what I tell my students is not only from a financial side, can you make more money in a small rural area than you can go into Kansas City or Dallas or Denver because the demand is so high. But you've also got an opportunity to make a difference in the community. You can be the local school attorney. You can serve on a local foundation. You're going to be the big fish in a little pond, and you can have a great influence doing that. Instead of getting lost in a big firm in a metro area and dealing with all of that and just sitting in your office cranking out billable hours. There's a personable aspect to a rural practice. And that's what I started with in North Platte, Nebraska. And that's, I still have a practice. I do estates in my spare time. I just finished up a $30 million estate of a Kansas decedent that died last year. And we did what's called a special use valuation election for that. I'm working on a Kentucky one right now. It's probably the largest farmer in Kentucky. And I've got another Kansas one. So I do that work on the side. But the marketing aspect, it just helps fill in everything. And so that's why I do the blog, I do the TV, satellite radio, I do the 2 other radio programs and all the writing. And it just feeds on itself. And it's how you build and you continue to market yourself. But I would agree with you, attorneys are very poor at that. Law schools are poor at that. And I'm trying to change that culture at Washburn too. I've got other colleagues at the law school that look at me and say, why do you do all this stuff? And they just do not understand what that can do for you. They're just locked into go teach a class and that's it, or write a law review article. And they're finally, I think some of them are starting to understand there's a lot more people that will read, and you can have a greater impact with a well-written blog article than people will ever see a law review article.
Yeah, amen. And Roger, do you have like a team with you? I mean, this is an extraordinary amount that you're cranking out. Like, is there do you have a bunch of associates? Like, what's your practice structure like?
You're looking at it. I have nobody.
Wow, interesting. Okay, so out of curiosity, with all that you're doing, what causes you to not grow, leverage, open additional practices, franchise to fill in all these needs? I mean, you're the guy. Like it is super clear you're the guy. And I understand that everybody has their own unique dynamic of how they live their life. So just curious, what has prompted you to decide not to grow and expand and leverage your genius in other ways?
Well, it's just, I think probably being so busy and just keeping up with what I have to keep up with. I haven't wanted to add anything else on. I have had opportunity, for example, to buy a national tax firm, tax continuing ed firm. And that was going to be too involved and would pull me away from some other things that I didn't want to do that. But no, I'm happy with what I'm doing. I've got another iron that's in the fire. I'm looking for a national sponsor on it. And and I've got radio networks that want to do it. I produced a radio program, which is a 90 seconds of me and 60 seconds of an ad to fit a 2.5 minute time slot. And there are about 200 stations nationwide that are waiting for that as soon as I can find a sponsor to pay for that. So if you got any ideas on that, I would entertain that. But
Sure.
Those stations are coast to coast that are waiting. They say we'll take it. We'll run it in our prime slot in terms of time because they've already tested it and they said, oh man, there's demand for that. We'll be able to sell ads. And so I'm trying to find a national sponsor for that or sponsors for that. Yeah. So that's another one right now we're working on.
So interesting. That may be an access point to just play with in a minute. So Bob, can I ask you this? So you sort of sit in in a very different world, being in a top 100 firm. Like what are the dynamics? And I'm not asking for anything confidential, but how would you share the dynamics of that journey?
Well, I recall when I got out of law school in California, I thought the last thing I would ever want to do is work for a big law firm. I really did. It was the last thing I wanted to do. And I ended up starting as a prosecutor, but then I went into a small to mid-sized firm in Walnut Creek, California. Enjoyed that because I did construction litigation defense. And really just, your life is just a series of adventures, frankly. And one thing led to another. And being with a big firm now, actually, I couldn't be happier. And the reason why is principally because, one, I have extraordinary resources that I can, reach out to. And if clients call with virtually any kind of issue, chances are we have someone nationwide or in our national offices that can address it for them. So I really like the idea to be able to really work with clients and meet their needs, and that's gratifying. But in a way, much like what Roger said, I'm somewhat of a silo. I mean, I work with a couple associates, but and my partners know what I do, and they send me clients when the need arises. But I'm in a very small, contained legal area, and I like that too because there's probably only 3 or 4 of us in the country that do this.
And what is it exactly? Yeah, if you could please share.
I represent, the government. The government acquires all kinds of goods and services. Yeah. So when they do so, they have to go through a competitive process. But then you take that same process that they use to acquire goods and services, and you have to apply it to real estate. So when the government wants to lease space or acquire space or build space, they still have to do it through the competitive process. So where you enter into a lease with the government for space, and by the way, 50% of the space that the federal government occupies is leased. So you go into your local post office, you go into your Social Security office, you go into the IRS office, chances are it's leased. Very few offices are actually in government-owned facilities. And so most of my clients are real estate folks who are very accustomed to sitting down and doing a deal. That's all they want to do. Let's do a deal. So then they see ads for a space for the federal government, and they learn probably very informally from others that, by the way, you have to compete for that, and there's a process for it, and you need somebody to help you navigate that. And so I get just cold calls from all over the country, people telling me or asking me, could I help with them compete for a real estate deal? I mean, for example, I represent the owner of about 5 FBI field offices. There are 35 field offices that they built in the last, maybe 15, 20 years. And it was an initiative that the government started. And these are standalone facilities with 100-foot setbacks, high security and blast resistant and all that. And, I represent the owners, and just last week or a couple of weeks ago, flew out to one of the cities to meet with a client about extending the lease. So, you feel, frankly, you feel a purpose sometimes. Sometimes it's the smaller leases, not so much, but you really feel like you're helping out a client understand how they can lease to the government. And these are good. And by the way, from a financial standpoint, this is like gold.
Yeah.
You do a deal with the government, they'll keep paying you for that firm term, whatever it is. Many of these clients have put together huge portfolios of government occupied facilities and have built a real business.
Awesome. Well, very, very cool stuff. So do you know, I'll ask you, Bob, first. Do you know what we kind of do here and what I'm up to, or not really at all?
That's a good point. Not really at all. Craig was very persuasive. He said, I needed to participate. Would I participate? I never, my attitude is I'm never going to say no to an opportunity. Okay. I want to hear what's involved, and then you go from there. You go through life fairly uninformed if you at least don't listen.
Yeah. So what I believe in is that there's a unique science of influence. So what I do, not unlike yourself when you speak, not unlike Roger, I speak about how people go from hello to yes integrally. So, you guys are brilliant. Like, this is outstanding and super fun. So I'd love to talk for like 10 hours about all this. But I've had the unique privilege, for example, of Scott Rothstein, the largest Ponzi schemer in the history of Florida. I was the first person. I went down with the former head of white collar crimes for the New York office of the FBI, and my client was asked to invest $8 million, and and he was there to help vet the deal. And we flew down, and we're sitting in this Scott Rothstein's office, and we're done. And this gentleman from the FBI, I mean, brilliant guy, wonderful person, is like, yeah, this sounds great. Like, let's do the deal. And I was like, are you kidding? This is crazy. And the guy owned a 300-person law firm. The name was Rothstein, Rosenfeld, and Adler. There's an MSNBC American Greed episode on it. And I said, like, are you like, and I was respectful. I'm like, there's no way this is real. And this is a true story. He looked up at the wall. He said, there's Scott Rothstein and John McCain. There's Scott Rothstein and Jed Bush. There's Scott Rothstein and Dan Marino. There's Scott Rothstein and Alonzo Mourning. You know, here's an article online about Scott Rothstein give $1 million to a hospital. What are you talking about? And so, and that was like years into my influence training and belief structures. But I find it so, and we fought and argued, and my client was incredibly upset with me. Rothstein essentially threatened my entire future by saying he was going to destroy my reputation everywhere in the world. And he knew everybody. And at the end of the day, 2 months later, the FBI raided his office and arrested him, and multiple other members of their team went to prison. And Rothstein's doing 45 years in federal prison because he was running a Ponzi scheme. And he took $1 billion off of people, most of whom were represented by attorneys. So I share that because what we do here in the Real Raw is we work on the concept of influence. One other quick access point for me, you know, and we're mentioning judges, Bob, a bit ago, and control. So when I was, I'm privileged to have represented a client and having the top jury verdict in the state of Arizona in the last decade. And in that case, when we were in state court, incredibly interesting dynamic, because in state court, my client was forced out of his company, and we received quote fair value, right, for the interest. And I thought the state judge was doing a suboptimal job, to say the least. And so we filed in federal court for breach of fiduciary duty, and we had to make new law in America that fair value was separate and distinct from a subsequent breach of fiduciary duty case if somebody was forced into electing fair value, even if you went through a state court proceeding. They were saying issues of federalism prevented our case. It went up to the Ninth Circuit. And the bottom line, resolution was that compensatory damages in a breach of fiduciary duty case subsequently in federal court to a state court action for fair value if our allegation was the breach of fiduciary duty caused the election resulted in the jury verdict. All that gobbledygook aside, when we were running through the mock trial processes, we were being told by the jury verdict consultants that the case was worth between $1 and $3 million max, right? And that we had all kinds of extraordinary problems. And through those mock trial processes, the first round of mock trials, we generated $3, $4, and $5 million in the verdicts. In the second round, we generated 17, 27, and 37 million in the verdicts. And so what that showed me, and this is 23 years of study of speaking on stages and sales and marketing and lawyering, is through the tiniest micro distinctions, smallest inputs, just extraordinary differentials happen. And so my life's work stands for that proposition, is that our egos, our learning, can tell us that we know things, right? And we know everything about something, right? And for me, in the space of influence, which I literally study and learn more every day, as a lunatic, sort of like Roger is to his study of the world of farming. I'm sure many things, and you, I'm sure as well, Bob, in the space of leasing. You guys are two absolute mavens in your space, right? Spaces. That's what I study and believe, that these little differentials change the dynamic of a $3 million case as opposed to a $27 million case. and that those things happen all the time. And by the way, with integrity, because my client got destroyed and horrible wrongs were perpetrated. And because of all the complexities that were presented by the other side and their attorneys, there seemed to be no hope. So yeah, like that's what I talk about. And I believe the same thing if you're going to go raise money on stage for charity. Like small differences might be the difference between raising 200,000 and 2 million, 2 million and 20 million. So that's what we do. And what this, when we were on the Real Raw, we literally role play through things, and we give each other feedback and assessments on how things go. So, today's group ended up, being a very small group. So I leave it to you guys if you want to do it or not. But I would be thrilled to I'd be happy to do it. I'd be thrilled to have you guys back on a different day. And we do some with attorneys. We do some with national speakers, coaches, trainers, TV accountants, just an incredible diversity of people that we have on regularly to just explore the superpower of influence. So that's like what we're doing here.
Interesting. So is this your business venture? Or, I mean, is this what you do in addition to practicing law, or?
Yeah. And just for the fun and uniqueness of the curiosity, I believe that we can have multiple outcomes come from different things. So yes, the name of my company is Unblinded. And so I run training seminars, events, I speak on stages all over the place about these topics. In addition, I own Callagy Law, my law firm, and we have, as I mentioned a little bit ago, we have 125 people that work there, diversity of practice areas. And this same training is how I train the folks inside my firm. This company, my company Unblinded, also gives me the opportunity to run programs and trainings for accountants, lawyers, architects, real estate brokers, professional services providers, in investors, et cetera. And it creates a ton of relationships for the law firm. So there's an incredible synergy between the two. That makes sense.
So do you do training sessions with major law firms, I presume? I mean, I'm part of the litigation practice at Holland and Knight. We have litigation groups all over the country, and most of my colleagues spend more time in the court than I do, but I would presume this is the kind of thing that they might benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, with absolute humility, I didn't say this yet, and I say this like it before I say it, the answer is yes. Before I say this, I want to really cautiously pre-frame it with people of your level of mastery, of influence, of integrity, of work and knowledge. So I believe that influence is literally the only learnable superpower. I went to Columbia University as an undergrad. I went to Seton Hall Law School, graduate with honors. And in neither of those places did anybody tell me that. I had unique distinctions in the national world of moot court and law school. But even in that, and I had a great coach, a wonderful person, nothing like the science of how to do this was not being taught anywhere, right? And so it wasn't until after Ivy League undergrad, law school, that I began to learn from other people in the space and the science of influence. And some of it was highly manipulative and awful. A lot of sales training talks about closing and taking and, bad stuff. And so I was like, wow, this matters. I was the first person in my direct family line to go to college. I'm like, this matters. Where we're going in life, it's unbelievably impacted by our ability to influence. I can't influence anybody to do anything. I'm a pretty introverted person. Yes, I was captain of my college baseball team, but I did that through actions and work ethic. I didn't do it through any of the spoken word, and I don't even know how all this works. So I'm going to be in big trouble if generating business in the legal profession matters. I'm stuck. I'm going to be stuck in a library forever. I came out of law school working for a big firm. So that was there. And then as I learned over time, speaking to people, it's difficult because everybody's like, oh yeah, I'm a great talker. Hey, you're great with people. There's the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? So there's this conflation of our personality and our ability to influence, and ego gets wrapped around it. And it's very hard to distinguish these dynamics. Rogers very purposely said, hey, you got to be able to say it in a minute. So here's what I'll say. So my version of saying it in a minute has become this. If you're running a 100-meter dash, you can get timed. If you're playing soccer as a team, somebody wins and loses. But we don't really have that after moot court, in life, right? So I put out a $250,000 bet for charity on the internet, right? My charity would be the American Foundation for the Blind. If anybody would like to take me up on that bet, it can out-influence me on a neutral set of undisclosed facts. So it's just like, here's facts, and let's play the game of, people we don't know, judging and assessing. And I have not been taken up on that bet yet, but I don't do that egotistically. I do it for the 1 minute shock value of what Roger was explaining. Like, say it quickly. So here's how I say it quickly is the things I'm teaching, sharing, right? They're at that level of confidence. So yeah, I would love to talk more about that. And I'd be happy to, conclude or answer any questions or role play. But what might be fun is to come back. Maybe we do. This is a real raw open, and being very candid. Craig, this is wonderful. People of your levels of distinction would typically operate more on the real raw. This is sort of, if there's TED and TEDx. Today is TEDx. TED, we have, Craig is on as a judge and other things, are like, but that's where we have a little bit more bells and whistles to the show, if you will. So I would almost feel like, wow, I wouldn't be serving your levels of distinction if we, did what we do today. And would happily invite you guys to come in as judges, on one to, judge some other distinguished and successful people on their ability to influence. People get scored, and that's how it kind of works. So like, said differently, it's like, wow, Craig, this is amazing. These guys are straight up rock stars. This is incredible. And yeah, I'd be happy to explore that or other things. But it's an honor to have met and chatted today.
Well, that's kind of you to say that. Sean, I agree with you that, to be successful in the practice of law, I think you have to be a master of influence in some form or fashion, whether it's negotiations or settlements or whatever, trials. And I think that is where many attorneys struggle. I look at things probably a little differently than my colleagues. I'm just not trying to sell hours. I'm trying to sell an outcome. I'm trying to sell a business purpose. So I guess what I'm kind of curious about is, you're practicing law, you're representing clients in mainstream practice. And so, where does this translate to revenue for you in terms of what we're doing today? I'll be frank.
Yeah. So what we're doing today doesn't translate to revenue directly at all, but I get to meet super cool people like yourselves and potentially do programs, and potentially do things jointly, so, Roger said, hey, he's interested in some.
Okay. So, to give you, this may not be, an exact example, but, I served as general counsel of the U.S. General Services Administration. We had a staff of 145 attorneys. And I felt, at least when I took over in that position, that oftentimes the government was at a significant disadvantage because our attorneys weren't trained at all in any negotiation skills. So I searched the universe of counselors in that field, and we had our entire staff go through negotiation training. And to this day, I still draw back on some of the principles that I learned in that for the purposes of negotiating resolutions of disputes. Is that something comparable that you're talking about? To the extent that we have a staff of litigators in Washington, and many of them appear before, federal district courts all over the country, principally though for us in the Washington office, the local district courts. Is that something that you're talking about, is that you work with, with us?
Yeah. And it could be, and this is the, I guess, most unique level of distinction, is that I know that there is a model of influence, and this is where we can get really, it can get a bit confusing for people, is I think that very same model of influence applies if I'm deposing an adverse witness.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
or if I'm leading my son's baseball team,
Mhm.
right? And so what that could sound like is that it's very generic and basic, right? Kind of like how to win friends and influence people, but it's anything but. Like, I think there's 4 steps, 10 indispensable elements, and 4 energies of human influence. And I have crazy stories, you know, in that one of those federal cases, I had an expert witness withdraw in a case, this $27 million verdict case, withdraw her expert opinion. Now think of this for a second, right? She withdrew her expert opinion 2 hours into the deposition. She was their key witness on the seminal point in the entire case. And I had her withdraw her entire opinion. They flipped out. They went out of the room, right? Went nuts, had her come back on the record shaking, right? She put her opinion back on the record, and 30 minutes later had to withdraw it again, right? So, and they flew her to a different country during trial because I was going to have her come and testify for us. True story, right? And so, and there's many others, right? And
Well, no, I mean, every day you need these kinds of skills. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I talked yesterday to one of the government's attorneys on a matter where I was trying to persuade her that my interpretation of the law was preferred, and absolutely, it'd be nice to be able to sharpen those skills.
Yeah. So, and my entire dynamic, and if I could throw, so by the way, we did not come here to have this conversation. Thank you.
No, it's okay. It's okay. That's all right.
Yeah.
The
way this,
you know, I don't know. I've been a licensed attorney for, 43 years. So in that time, you know, you can kind of sift through, the details and get to the grist. So yeah, I think that's, well, you've been very successful, and obviously what you have learned and have become proficient in sounds like you've been very successful. So it might be something that we would be very interested in.
yeah, well, I appreciate that. And just to be clear, like the way this normally would work is we would come in, and this is how integrous human influence works. So I don't believe in just following the script, because I'm like, holy cow, these guys are incredible. Like, great job, Craig. Like, wow, this is a remarkable duo, right? That's here today. Pause, right? So, because normally what would happen is we go, okay, you're going to be role play. Craig is going to be whomever you'd want him to be. What would be a big yes you're seeking in the world? I heard Roger seeking to create this marketing. So, okay, Craig could be a potential sponsor. How would you go from hello to yes? Bob would say, you know, what are you seeking in the world? Maybe it's a government, adversary attorney, or, person on the other side of the transaction attorney. And let's have a conversation. But I was like, I felt that it would perhaps in this forum not meet with both of your level of accomplishment. So this has never happened before. This is like the 125th-ish, could be 123rd, 127th, somewhere in there, since Corona started, Real Raw, that we've done. And this is the first time I've ever said pause, and with both of your levels of accomplishment and background. And that said, I mean, we've had some of the top motivational speakers in the world, TV lawyers appear on, but I think I'd rather have you on the big stage than this stage. And great job, Craig. If you want to come on as judges, great. So I didn't want to just.
Sure. I mean, I'd like to follow up. I'm looking. I've told one of the roles that I enjoy is that I get to mentor some of the young associates. It's fascinating. I think someone mentioned earlier in this call about what they come out of law school knowing and what they don't know. So it's always fun to take a look, see what they know, so what they don't know. There's one thing that you can't garner just being on this earth, and that's experience. I mean, you got to go through it, okay? And after you've done it for a few years, you recognize the value of that. And but I will say this: I tell them all the time. I mean, I still learn something new every day, and sometimes more than just a few things every day. So you stop learning, and you just you're not growing. So yeah, I'd welcome the opportunity. One of the things in my practice that usually extends my days is that it's a nationwide practice. have clients out in California as well as on the East Coast. And so it's approaching 2:30 Pacific time, and I have a conference call that I have to jump on to.
Yes.
But I would welcome the opportunity to do this again, or to to explore other avenues of what you do. So
Yeah.
sure.
Listen, this has been a privilege, and I really thank you, Bob, and thank you, and Roger. Thank you very much. And would you be interested in coming on the Real Raw, perhaps as a judge, and coming back?
Sure. Yeah. I'm very interested in that.
Yeah. Well, I'm honored. And Craig, brother, amazing. Karen, we didn't even acknowledge you yet. My apologies. I was like, wow. Karen,
Well, I have one question for Karen though before I conclude.
please.
We've been doing all these Zoom calls, and so someone needs to teach me how I do a background like yours.
Yeah, you just right at the bottom left-hand corner where it says your video, click on that little arrow that goes up, and it should show you choose a virtual background. And that's where you would choose your virtual background. And you can add your own if you'd like.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of distracting though to think that you just might be on the beach, but I know better than that.
Well, that's where I want to be, so that's why I put it up there.
Well, just for one last second of fun, I know you got to jump, Bob, but because the beach is here. So I'm going to head up to the roof so we can sort of send this off. So we have the bay on this side of life. All right, and we have the ocean over there. So we're here in Long Beach Island, New Jersey, and it's definitely not the Jersey Shore like you'd see on TV. But thank you, Bob. Thank you, Roger.
Well, thank you. I mean,
Sure.
I'm a native New Yorker, so I guess it's okay to entertain a presentation from New Jersey. So
Listen, have a beautiful day, Craig.
Thanks so
Awesome
much.
job, brother. Karen, thank you, and we'll talk in a little bit.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you. Bye.